calm sea is an illusion. There is always the unexpected lurking just below the surface, and when chaos erupts, some can swim to the shore, while others will sink into the abyss. Your host, Chris Kane, is an insurance adjuster and also an agent licensed in multiple states. He spent over 30 years helping people with claims, and this podcast is to help business owners, supervisors, and employees to be prepared before and after a work comp injury occurs. Batten down the hatches and join us as we navigate the sea of confusion.
Can you go ahead and tell us what the role is of an insurance adjuster? Like, are they only saving and interested in saving the insurance company money? Are they trying to trick you into saying it was your fault so they don't have to pay? Like, what's the deal?
Well, really, when you get down, you got to determine what an adjuster is. And in the insurance community, it's really the most important job in the whole insurance community when you think about it. They control what's paid out. And then everything that you ever see that an insurance company's paid has gone through a claims department or an insurance adjuster. And by definition, they're a person that adjusts the claim. They basically come up with what the value is, what the liability is, and they pay it. Now, to say that insurance adjusters are out to get you, no. Well, at least not 90% of the time. There is the unscrupulous people out there, just like there's, bankers that don't have your best interests in line and everything else. But 90% of us that have been in the industry a long time really are trying to come up with what's fair for what both you are as the consumer or the adverse party to the insurance company and to the insurance company themselves.
All right. So they just make sure like the prices are right onto each claim, or?
Well, you got to look at it by different lines. We've been talking about workers' comp, and workers' comp is pretty much statutory. And we've gone over this before. The state determines the legislature and the state houses determine the statute, and then the department that's running the workers' comp. In Tennessee, it's the Bureau of Workers' Compensation. In Georgia, it's the State Board of Workers' Compensation. Alabama, it was the Industrial Commission. They changed it up. But whatever government agency, the adjuster has to do it in accordance with the laws and rules that are written. They can't go out there and overpay somebody. They can't go out there and make an agreement with somebody unless it's approved by the state. So to say that they're out to get you, no. They're trying to apply the law as written to the payments that you get. Because everything that's paid in workers' comp is paid in accordance with the statute or a rule.
So how do you convince people to trust all these adjusters? Because, we have the 10% that are a little sleazy, even though 90% are trying to follow all the rules. But somebody gets injured, and they think the panel of physicians is only looking out for like the company. And now this injured person has to go ahead and tell the insurance adjuster everything. So can you kind of see where that disconnect, where people are getting a little bit distrustful?
They get a little bit distrustful. A lot of people see what's advertised on TV, and the insurance company's out to get them. The insurance companies, if they were out to get you, the states would shut them down a long time ago. They're out there to perform a service, and that's really to protect you from risk and provide you means to get back to where you were before as it comes to workers' comp. When you're talking about property claims, they're trying to get your house and property back to what it was prior to whatever loss, whether it be a fire, flood, tornado, whatever. On an auto claim, they're trying to make sure that everybody gets settled up as far as, taking care of their hospital bills, their car damages and things of that nature, which gets into a whole different area when you're trying to determine fault. But in workers' comp, to say it's a no-fault system is a little sort of stretching it. but it's a statutory system. It's basically there are injuries that occur at work that, if they fall within the guidelines of the statute, are covered. So you're not out there trying to gather up your medicals and, try to fund a lawsuit. It's called uh, you know, the grand compromise between employers and employees. The employers provide medical, they provide indemnity coverage. At the same time, the employee provides that that's going to be their exclusive remedy. They're not going to sue the employer. They're not going to do other things that for damages that are outside what the statute provides. So the adjuster has to take all these rules and apply them to your claim. So when they're asking you questions, they're wanting, number one, to get the facts. What happened? What were you doing? Now, if you were out there, horse playing and doing something that you shouldn't have been doing, yeah, they're not going to be too kind and they're going to nail you down as to what happened. But if you're out there, you're just standing at your workstation and, let's just say somebody with a Hyster backs into you from your company, there's nothing that's your fault. I mean, they're going to go ahead and pick it up and they're going to confirm what's happening. Now, that doesn't say that the employer's not going to, penalize the person that wasn't paying attention. But as far as the workers' comp, the person's not having to deal with that. They're just having to deal with getting better and get back to work.
Interesting. So whenever somebody's like messing around with a forklift, trying to raise people versus the one guy just standing, trying to do his job, gets ran over by a forklift, they're just going to see who's at fault.
Well, that gets into a little bit more complicated question, because if they're doing something outside of their normal duties, talk about the forklift driver, that can open you up to some things that get outside of the grand compromise. Because, I mean, if it's something that the employer's allowed to do that's, grievous, let's just say they're having forklift races and the employer knows about it and somebody gets hurt that's just bystander, there's going to be some openings there. And that's the thing what everybody has to realize. You just can't put everything into one situation and say this is the way it's going to be for all. Every case that's out there, I've had cases where the facts were just about the same on both cases, but just a little change in something that happened made the two outcomes totally different. So, and I think that's what people in general, not outside of workers' comp, but inside workers' comp, need to understand. You just can't say, well, these are just all the same type of claims. We're just going to have them the same. No, there's different things. We've gone into it before. You got people that have pre-existing medical conditions like diabetes, other comorbidities that make the recovery process slower. You got other things that come into play as age. If you get hurt or break your leg, you're probably going to heal a whole lot faster than I am, just mere fact of because of your age. So there's a lot of things that go into it that we're trying to get set up when we do a claim. To sort of go into a little bit of what the adjuster's doing. The adjuster's trying, number one, to verify all the information they have that's been reported to them by the employer. 9 times out of 10, the adjuster does not know who you are. They do not know really the employer who they are, because they've not been in the sales side. Now, if you're a large employer and the adjuster does a lot with that one employer, they may know the employer, but for most of the time, they're not going to know either party. So they're basically going into it, okay, let's see what we got. And sometimes, adjusters find things that the employer's done wrong, then they have to address that too. from not posting the panel to maybe doing something that was a violation of work rules, something that should have been done to prevent it. So they're having to basically be the eyes and ears of the insurance company, and at the same time, take care of all the payments, take care of all the filings, and then number two, make sure you're getting everything that you need. Because at the end of the day, what everybody wants is a claim to be closed. First thing everybody wants is a claim not to happen to begin with. And that goes back to loss control, and usually the claims adjuster doesn't have anything to do with that. But two, when you do get a claim, you want the adjuster, number one, to be responsive, to gather the information they need to make the decisions, and three, to make sure they got everything correctly. I mean, you wouldn't want, they pull your social security number and you've got listed down that you're 44 instead of 24, it's going to throw a red flag up there. I mean, so there's things that have to be correct, or this causes problems and filings and things of that nature. Because the more we get more computerized, the more you get with the artificial intelligence, which I call artificial ignorance, but there is a purpose to it. It's able to scan a lot of data and look for things that are errors or anomalies or whatever you want to call it computer-wise. So the pressure's more on them to make sure that everything's correct. The other thing you got to realize, the adjuster's not just handling one claim. Most adjusters out there especially on the work comp claim, are handling hundreds of claims. I mean, let's just break that down. Let's just say, we get people that advertise all the time, well, our adjusters just have low caseloads of 100 claims. Well, think about that. There's 20 days in usually a month work week. You got 100 claims. Now, that doesn't count the claims that are coming in and closing. Let's just say you got 100 claims. So those 100 claims, you got at least make 2, if not 3 phone calls a week. So and you're not going to get to all the claims that week. So there's over 100 phone calls. And you know as well as I do, when you call somebody, you usually don't get them on the first try, or they call you back. So you got a majority of your time dealing with phone calls. Then on top of that, you got the emails that come in. Plus everything they do, they've got to document in their claims management system or the computer system for the company. So it doesn't really leave a lot of time they'll chit chat with you, but really sometimes it comes across as them being rude. But when that reality is they've got a lot to do and they want to get everything done to get things moving. Nobody really wants to hold things up in a claim unless something's just terribly wrong. But the normal claim that comes in, you want to get everything done as quickly as possible, and then work towards getting it closed. And that's what the adjusters are looking at. Are they out to get you? No. I mean, they're not sitting there now. You start playing games with them, or you're trying to do something that's against what the company policy is or what the statute is. Yeah, they can be a little curt in that regard, because number one, to deal with that, you're taking up time that they don't have, because they got another 99 claims they got to contend with that everybody's fussing about. So you've got to put it in line to what job it is. Give you an example. Daniel Day-Lewis, several years ago, an actor, allegedly was going to play an insurance adjuster, and he'd always research his part. And he sat with the insurance adjuster for 2 days and went back and said, I can't even comprehend what they're doing as much as they're doing in a day. I don't want to play this part. So it's a lot. It's a lot to handle. It's a lot that you're expected to know. And then on top of that, you're the outgoing valve of the money for that company. So every dollar's got to be accounted for. But you want to make sure you're spending the money where it needs to be spent to help the people get back to work, to help them recover, to help them get as close to what they were pre-injury as possible. That's the goal of most adjusters. When you vary from that, I guess, course, that's where people say, oh, I had problems, or oh, you know, they weren't responsive, or I just had a problem, and things of that nature. So that's what you got to look at when you got to keep it in your mind when you're talking about, adjusters and what they do and things of that
I just imagine a bunch of insurance adjusters with the Gossip Girl flip phone taking all these hundreds of claims because that is pretty rough to go through.
nature. It is. It's a
So,
lot. It's a lot when you come in. And then let's just say you got these that are coming in, and then you get something that's a catastrophic injury. You got somebody that's, you know, got their hand caught in a piece of machinery. You're trying to coordinate emergency room treatment. So there you've got one where it's taking up pretty much half your day, or not all your day, and everything else got postponed today. So you're trying to balance that in that too. So it's a tough job. I think there's a lot of things that the insurance industry does that shoots themselves in the foot. I think they've gone a long way from training adjusters like they should have. They've they've put too much on them. They want all these particular fields done so their computer will work correctly. But at the end of the day, it's basically in workers' comp about getting that employee back to work, compensated, and the file closed. These other things that they pile on them really just slow that process down. Another thing that gets me, and I fought it, but it's a common practice. You've got an adjuster that's handling med only claims. Well, as soon as they start losing time, you switch it to another adjuster. Well, that adjuster doesn't, I mean, they can read the notes, but they don't know all the things going on. So there they are backing up again. So you're getting frustrated as a employee because you're having to repeat the same things again. Now, I mean, I've recently had one with the insurance carrier. They're on their fourth adjuster on a simple claim. And it's really, it's frustrating to the employer. It's also frustrating for the agent because we're catching the brain. Why can't they keep an adjuster? Why can't we just have one adjuster instead of switching all this? The other thing that comes to play is, when you look at the cost of claims, medical is the most significant cost. The indemnity's controlled. I mean, by statute how much you're going to pay. It's based off their average weekly wage. There's a cap to it. You know what that's going to be. The medical, with everything that comes out from prescriptions to different treatments to surgeries, you're asking the most inexperienced adjuster with the most claims to handle the biggest expense for a company, which makes no sense to me. If you really wanted to think that through, you would put your most experienced people doing the medical only to keep them from being lost time, number one, and then two, to keep these medical costs under control. Because when the lost time experience adjuster gets it, they get and they go, oh, we should have done this back there. Well, it's hard to get the train back on the tracks when it's run off of it. So there's a lot of problems that the insurance industry has done to themselves that it's just going to take a matter of time for them to realize, and it's all cyclical to do. But at the end of the day, what you're most concerned about is how they take care of you.
it's a lot of stuff going behind closed doors that the common public don't really know about.
No, and they're misled by the advertisements on TV. They think they're all sitting around in a boardroom or, you know, just working 2 or 3 hours a day, and that's not the case.
So we're gonna go over the top internet searches that we discovered that common people are Googling up. So for our number one search, should I talk to an insurance claims adjuster?
Yes.
Yeah. So, but what happens if you talk too much with an insurance adjuster? Like you're okay, you're nervous, you're kind of repeating the story, but you don't know what's gonna happen. You're kind of fearful. Like maybe this guy fell off a ladder and he doesn't want the rest of the company kind of laughing at him, so he kind of downplays the whole incident, even though falling off a ladder hurts. I don't think anybody can deny that. That's just a big injury in itself. So, what happens if you talk too?
I don't. Well, number one, if you talk too much, it's weighing the adjuster down with too much information. I mean, I don't think. I think what really needs to happen is the adjuster will lead you and guide you on what they need. Now they're going to ask you what happened. They're going to ask the facts of what happened, which needs to be truthful. Where I run into problems when I was adjusting, and it was always sort of an indication to me when somebody didn't want to talk to me about something, or they automatically just went straight to a lawyer, usually because they're trying to hide something. Maybe a prior medical condition they don't want anybody to know about. It may be something that they contributed to the accident and then was trying to get out of. But at the end of the day, most of that stuff's going to come out. I mean, there's a lot of tools that adjusters have at their disposal. And in this day and age, everywhere you go, somebody sees you. I mean, unless you're out here in the country, you know, walking down the street of Chattanooga, Tennessee or New York City, there's cameras and you're being recorded all the time. Same way inside your company. If you're in a manufacturing facility, they've got cameras. Even restaurants have cameras. So I think it's better for people to just come out and say, hey, this is what happened. Be as truthful, recall everything that you recall, and go from there. Because, I mean, it's like the old thing where you start in a room full of people and you whisper a statement in the first person's ear and they repeat it to each other 30 times and you get the last person. It's a totally different sentence because our minds think differently, we perceive things differently. So they may be telling you the truth, but what they perceive that the truth may not actually be that. They may think that they did something wrong when in reality somebody was on the other side of that piece of equipment and flipped the wrong switch and they didn't know it because you only perceive what's in front of you. Doesn't mean you're lying. It just means this is what you saw and what you remember. A legal term for it is called res gestae, basically meaning when you get the information closer to when it happened, it's going to be closer to that actual events versus a month later versus a year later versus 2 years later. I mean, you probably can't remember something that happened on a particular day at school. Just say somebody got hurt. You probably can't remember everybody's names that was sitting around there or whatever because you're not with them anymore. So the mind, we gather a lot of information, but we can't retain it like a computer or a picture can.
It's funny because the game where you whisper a statement to somebody else, it's called telephone. So I think that's pretty fitting for insurance adjusters.
Yeah, we wear that phone out.
So speaking of timelines, when should I contact an insurance adjuster?
Well, number one, the insurance adjuster should be reaching out to you. Uh, when when we're talking about workers' comp, you should contact your employer immediately when you're hurt. I mean, don't wait over the weekend. Don't you know if you're hurt and something's happened, you need to go ahead and report it immediately. The adjuster should be reaching out to you. So to answer your question, when they reach out to you, you miss them, or when they call you, because 90% of the time when something happens, you're not even going to know who the insurance adjuster is. They've got the claims got to be reported. They've got to assign it to the adjuster, you know, for whatever criteria that they're using. You know, hopefully it's somebody locally, but most of the time it's somebody several states away that's trying to adjust this. So, you know, to answer your question, you should respond to the adjusters when they call. And if you've got a problem and you know who the adjuster is and they've not reached out to you, then yes, you should call them as soon as the claims happen and let them know, you know, what you need, and they'll tell you the process that they'll go through.
So when the insurance adjuster goes ahead and contacts you, like the injured employee, what should I, if I was the injured, avoid when talking to an insurance adjuster, other than just bogging down with useless information? What other information do we need to avoid?
Things that are not factual. I mean, they need to be factual. You know, I was driving my car from point, from the the employer to the bank, to the bank back. Did I deviate? You need to tell them, because most phones, most things will track where you were. You need to be factual. You need to be honest, because the thing of it is, and most people just don't realize it. The problem is when you start manipulating the facts or not telling the whole truth, then it sort of snowballs, and then you lose credibility with the adjusters. So then they've sort of got you on their radar as, hey, I'm having to keep an eye out on it. And that's where you run into problems, because the adjuster may get a little standoffish, which I've done myself, because we're dealing with somebody that's not, wanting to do their own thing instead of, or hadn't told us everything. And then all of a sudden we're finding out on the back end. So it's better to let everybody know what's going on beforehand. Work with the adjuster. The adjusters are there to help you, as well as the insurance company as well.
So how should people prepare before talking to the adjuster? And I'm talking about how does the HR department prepares and how does the injured worker prepare?
Well, the HR department needs to pull their HR file. They need to have, date of birth, social security number, emergency contacts, whether they're married, divorced, dependents, things of that nature. And everybody goes, why you need that? Well, number one, the state asks for it. Number two, if something happens and they, let's just say had a broken leg and you end up with a blood clot and it goes to your lung and kills you, that's going to trigger death benefits. But you got to know who your dependents are. You it would be you wouldn't have any dependents, but if it was me, it would be you and your mom would be dependent on me and would be entitled to benefits. So there's a reason why they're asking. Sometimes it's a reason you really don't want to discuss. Nobody really wants to discuss, the inevitable, you know, death. And it's not to scare anybody. It's just a matter of, we need to have that information. You as the employer need to have, your employee needs to have all the facts, date, time, where it happened, address where it happened if it wasn't at work. You need to have who your primary doctors are. Have you seen them? Have you talked to them yet? Those type of things. because that helps in the process of it. Also, good to have is your prescriptions that you're on, because the one thing they're going to do, they're going to refer you to a doctor, or you're going to select a doctor, and they're going to ask for that information too. If you've already got it out there, it makes it so much easier and saves a whole lot of, redundant work for everybody.
Mm-hmm. And so the injured worker will just go ahead and update HR, and HR will have those files for the adjuster.
Well, HR should already have their files updated, but the you're talking about two different things. The adjuster's got to call the HR first, and they're going to get everything out of the HR file. The employee needs to make sure they've got all that information too, so they can verify with the adjuster. Those mistakes happen. I mean, they may have. I mean, you may have gotten married, you may have, and HR hadn't picked up on it yet, or you just got married and you need to change your name and things like that. There's a lot of things that are just little nuances that really, if you got them ahead of time, if you know how to get the forms filled out and go, it makes it so much smoother than having to go back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah, it's a lot of information going on. And because we know that 90% of insurance adjusters are doing the jobs, and we have the 10% that are still a little sleazy, kind of eyeballing those, are there any red flags to look for when talking to the adjuster? Like, are there certain things they can't ask an injured worker? Or what is an example of where an insurance adjuster crossed the line and just did something wrong or out of pocket?
I think the first thing that I'll always see is if the adjuster's asking a claimant or employee to do something that's not proper, like, you need to lie to the employer, you need to tell them to do this, you need to go to this doctor, but I want you to send a bill to the adjuster's home address. It's not the company address. There's a lot of things that go on that are fraudulent. Most of it is usually what I found when I investigated fraud is, and it's not necessarily an adjuster, but we're used in that context. The adjusters, has gotten with the doctor. They set up a phony, you know, let's say a piece of medical equipment or something like that, and they'll say that bill comes in, send it to me, and then we pay it, and they're skimming money off of it, or it's fraudulent altogether. The person never got it to begin with, but the company paid for it. I've seen, unfortunately, I've seen many, even at the executive level, not just the adjuster level, you know, do this for years, you collect millions of dollars, but they did it just little bits at a time over the course of these years, and then somebody got wise to it, and then all of a sudden you got the problem. That's why you see so much ridicule of the adjusters. The adjusters are under pressure just from what they're doing. That's why, you know, let's say an adjuster that's properly doing it, let's say you go and you had to go buy some crutches. It happened late at night, you bought it. Well, the adjuster's probably going to pay them back, but they're going to want the company's FEIN number, their federal identification number, because they got to make sure that they've got a W-9 or some sort of documentation showing who they're paying. So then the reason that is usually because somebody's been fraudulent in the past, when doing that. But there's other red flags, or you know, you know, telling somebody to endorse a check over, telling an employee where to cash their check. A lot of people are going to carriers are doing direct deposits. You gotta be careful on that. That they're sending it to the correct bank account, and it's the amount that's supposed to be paid, not some different amount. There's a lot of red flags of what to do. Not being able to get in touch with the adjuster. The agent can't get in touch with the adjuster. You can't get a hold of executive management. Those are red flags. Um, with the inflation coming the way it is, there's a lot of carriers that are under financial stress too. We've just seen State Farm go from an A-rated company to one of their companies going to a B-rated, which is, you know, that's a huge company that they've been downgraded on. Now, State Farm's got lots of carriers under their State Farm umbrella. It's just one of them, but still, that's that raises concern. Same way with a lot of these insurance companies that are out there that are smaller insurance companies, they're probably feeling it worse than the bigger ones. So you got to be mindful of your environment, of the finance, the holistically of the inflations and things of that nature that are going on. They're all negatively impacting these insurance companies.
So, like, I'm injured, and the insurance carrier comes up and asks me an inappropriate question. What would that inappropriate question kind of be, other than just like, oh, deposit your check here?
An inappropriate question.
Like, I'm laying broken on the ground, and the insurance adjuster looks over me and he says,
Well, I mean, the insurance adjuster's trying to put words in your mouth as to what happened versus just listening to you. Let me give an example. Lauren, tell me what happened at the accident scene versus, hey, did you walk out in front of this car? Doing leading questions that you really can't. Asking you questions and then not letting you further expound on the answers to the question. Asking just yes and no questions. To me, I mean that's good show on C-SPAN, but in the real world, you've got the right to explain your answer. If they're cutting you off, they're not letting you say what you need to say. Those are red flags.
interesting. So, the more closed questions, the more red flag.
Yeah, the more leading questions, the more you know, tell me is now. Sometimes you have to. Let's just say if I'm talking about an auto accident, then I may say, okay, you were in the northbound lane of I-75, or you were in the southbound lane of I-75. Those type of questions are leading, but they're leading to get to a descriptive answer. The questions you're concerned about are questions they're trying to, I guess, sort of trick somebody into saying something that would be detrimental to them. Like, well, you'd been drinking a bunch before the job, correct? And then
Yeah.
those type of things. You were on medication. Did that affect you? Those type of questions are really not for the adjuster to ask. They're really more for medical profession to ask. But some adjusters do, especially if it's something where it comes into a case where you've had a positive drug screen. Uh, then those questions are more appropriate. But the adjuster may be trying to rule out ways of being compensable. I mean, one thing people think, well, I've got a positive drug screen, I don't have comp claim. Well, that's not true. Uh, the example we gave a while ago, if you got somebody that's in let's say a manufacturing area, they got a workstation and they're doing their job, not doing anything else. They may be high as a kite, but somebody goes flying along with a forklift and takes them out. That's still going to be compensable, even though they were positive drug screen, because the drugs had nothing to do with that. That would have happened whether they've been high as a kite or sober as anybody else. So that's why I try to get to people when everybody wants to do hypotheticals, is that you almost have to say that's correct given that specific set of facts. But just to change one portion of that could change the outcome. Now, the guys, let's take the same scenario. If the guy's sitting there doing backflips off of his counter and falls out in front of the heister, yeah, that's not going to be compensable. Now, you got the same set of facts, except for one. So that's why the adjusters are trying to get everything factual nailed down as possible. They're going to pull the videos if there's videos available. They're going to get witness statements as to what happened. They're going to get, you know, when they go and ask the employer, they're going to ask, you know, has there been any problems with this employee? I mean, have they been doing anything irregular? You know, have they been playing softball, or are they doing some other activity that may have been the cause of this? So there's a lot of things, yes, that they're asking that probably shouldn't, but at the same time, those same questions can be appropriate in other situations as well.
So let's break down the steps that the insurance adjuster does when starting with, like, how soon an accident does the adjuster find out about it, and how does that whole process even begin? So can you just walk us through the claim file?
Okay, let's just do a simple one.
Yeah.
Let's say employee slips and falls and breaks an ankle. Does it end of the day, the ladies just say the employer's already gone. Well, they go ahead and take them to the doctor. Most of the time, when the employer's there, they're going to go ahead and call the carrier, the claims number that they report to. They'll call the agent in our case, and we'll get the facts, and we'll get everything rolling. The main thing is to make sure they get treatment. I mean, that's the first thing. We're not going to sit there and say, well, we ain't going to do anything till we investigate it. You try to take care of the person first, get them stabilized. So basically, the claim gets reported usually within 24 hours, unless it's something catastrophic. Catastrophic meaning life-threatening, lose loss of limb, something along that line. Usually the adjuster should be calling within 24 hours of the injury. When they call, they go through the processes we've talked before. They go contact the employer first, because they're going to know what all happened, or should know what all happened. Then they're going to turn around and call the employee, get the facts of what happened, when's your next doctor's appointment, what do you need, those type of things. Are you released to go back to work? Are you going to be off work for a while? Those type of things, which will trigger them calling back. If you're going to be off work, that's going to trigger them following up with the employer to get wage statements, things of that nature, to figure indemnity. The third phone call they're going to do is going to be contact the medical providers. You took them to the emergency room. Whether you're going to call the emergency room and say, hey, we got a work comp claim here. This bill needs to come to us. Here's the claim number, things of that nature. Because by statute, if it's a work comp claim, a medical provider cannot come after the employee for any funds. Even if the insurance company doesn't pay the entire claim, they pay it in network. Then it's what's called balance billing. They can't come after the employee, and they can't report it to the credit bureaus, which is what a lot of the unscrupulous hospital providers do. Because at every step of this, you're going to find you got bad actors and all of it. It's not just the insurance adjusters. But calling the employer, calling the employee, calling the medical provider in the industry is what's called the 3-point contact. You've contacted all three players in this claim and get everything coordinated. That should all happen within 48 hours in a normal circumstance. That way everybody's on board. Let's say they can come back to work, but they can't obviously walk around. The employer may have a job in the office, answering phones, doing filing stuff that they can do sedentary, so you don't incur the lost time. That's what everybody would like to happen. But you get people like contractors, these guys aren't in their office. They're out in their trucks all day long. They may not have anything that they can do light duty. So they're going to be off work. So you got to make sure that you get them, back to work as quickly as possible, because the longer they're out, the more the claim starts to cost. Just the mere fact of what you're going to be paying in indemnity benefits. So that's really how a claim should start off. If everything goes good on that, usually your outcomes are really good. If something doesn't happen, I'll give you an example. It's a week later and the adjuster's just getting around to calling, you've already got problems, because you're going to have people that were off work, or you got, medical providers already sending bills, those type of things that could easily be avoided if they communicate to begin with. And I think overall, and that's what this whole episode is it's got to be good communication. I mean, anything else causes a bad outcome. But if everybody's communicating, if everybody's, not up to something, for lack of calling it fraudulent or just misleading, things run really smooth. There's hundreds of claims every day that go really smooth, from, hey, I dislocated my finger, got it back, no impairment, I'm good, thank you, all the bills are paid, case closed. There's tons of those that happen every day. But there's also tons of them that happen every day that really should be that simple, but because we're not communicating, it becomes a problem. And then everybody up the line, from the agent to the adjuster to the insurance company to the employer, the policyholder, it causes friction, and it causes a problem. And it's like I tell my carriers, if I'm calling you about a claim, you need to already understand that I've been called about it, so there's a problem. I just don't call you just say, hey, I want to call the adjuster and chit chat and tell war stories. We'll do that at a social event somewhere. Well, I'm working, I want to get everything done. The adjusters want to get everything done. So that's why communication is so critical.
So the final words of wisdom from Work Comp Chaos is just good communication.
It's good communication. I mean, I think that's, you got to know, you got to have good communications. You got to know what to communicate, how to communicate. There's something, if an employer finds out there's something wrong, they need to be able to communicate to that adjuster without that adjuster just turning around and telling the claimant. I mean, they've got to be able to have that sort of communication, and vice versa. The claimant may tell something about the employer that the adjuster doesn't need to just turn around and tell the employer, but they do need to tell loss control and let them handle it, or underwrite and let them handle it. So there's a lot of things, moving parts out there, and we're trying to slice it down into navigating that sea of confusion, per se, trying to get it down to, what's the best course to take, what's going to navigate us through this claim to get to the outcome we want, versus navigating us into an off the cliff or off the waterfall. We want to be able to take these claims and make them as simple as possible. And that's why we do this. I mean, if we could just help somebody to say, hey, we understand what's going on and have a little understanding, compassion, and communication, it'll go so much further than, that just coming right out of the box being adversaries.
Yeah, well, that's all I have for today on how to talk to an insurance adjuster.
Well, now everybody will know how you have to talk every day to everyone.
Hopefully.
Thank you for your support of this podcast. For additional information, please visit our website, workcompchaos.com. All links available in the description below. Until next time, fair winds and following seas.